Welcome to Teachers in Business. I am thrilled today to have a guest. And I know every time I have a guest, I say they are my favorite people, but I only have people who are my favorite people on. I don't just invite strangers I don't know because I'm not a fan of just having any old people on. I want people I love. So today we have the fabulous Lisa Smith with us. She was a teacher for many years. She was a secondary instrumental music teacher, and she moved into a new educational role, teaching families how to reclaim their purpose and joy while connecting and guiding loved ones struggling with the disease of addiction to healthier choices, because she has experience with this and became who she needed to when her son was struggling with a substance use disorder and life was not going to plan. She uses her teaching skills and her understanding of humans and choices, along with everything she knows in science and compassion, to help families walk through their version of this and walk with and around and through addiction together rather than all the other ways, which are painful. So Lisa Smith, hi, thanks for
Hi,
coming.
thank you for having me.
I'm excited to chat. And that was the closest I've ever come to actually reading someone's bio. So yay. Um, usually I'm just like, and there are words here and I love them anyways. And here. So, for this podcast, what we get as a listener base is people who are teachers and are moving into other things. So can you start talking to me a little bit about teacher, what it means to you to be a teacher and how that sort of has evolved for you in your journey from sort of what is traditional in the box teaching to still teaching just in a new world version, right?
Yeah, I can. So I think I know that a lot of teachers, traditional teachers, grew up just knowing they were going to be a teacher. And that was not me. I did not, in fact, I didn't want to be a teacher. I said I didn't want to be a teacher, and kind of realized along the way in my musical journey that I was actually really good at it. And also got a lot back. And so I think my own approach to teaching, maybe in the traditional setting, was a little different than a lot of teachers. I've always taken the approach of a guide and really fostering an environment where my students could explore and figure out how to figure things out themselves. And I don't know if that's, I think some of that's because I didn't fall into teaching traditionally, like grow up and play teacher, and then always want to be a teacher. Part of it's that, and part of it's just my own journey of learning and how I learn, and being a very conceptual person, understanding that I need space to work around how do I get to an answer. And in music, I think that makes the best musician. I can tell somebody how a song goes, a piece of music goes, how something should sound. But if they can't go home and figure it out on their own, they're only learning that one piece of music with me in that moment. So they're not actually learning the subject. And so that's always been my approach in education. And I don't think that's always been embraced by administration in education. And thankfully, I didn't teach like math. And I taught something a little bit more conceptual, and people could understand that it was going to be more conceptual. But I had a lot of success in my students being successful learning their subject of music with me. And I think that's why. So that's always been my approach, guiding somebody to figure out how they can get to the answers themselves, and become a learner, because we sort of never stop learning. So it's not just in the moment for the test, for the year, for the final, for the concert, it's forever.
Well, and it's sort of like learning to, like, I'm a math person. So it's like the difference between learning to think like a mathematician versus solving this problem. Like I can try to make the same mangled comparison to music. It's like thinking musically and as a musician versus learning this piece, right? Like it's learning to build the skills that will let you solve any problem or play any piece or show up in music versus like you have to do this thing this way.
Exactly. Yeah. So becoming a musician as opposed to just presenting music, or becoming a mathematician, or becoming a scientist, or becoming a writer. That's not just learning the skill, that's learning all of the ins and outs. And I think my approach as a teacher was always to really encourage, which, that takes a little bit more time at the beginning. It's easier to just tell someone what the answer is and get them there quicker for the test or for the performance. But that's just never been the way I learned or performed. And so I really believed that, my job was to help students go out and do this, whatever it was that they wanted to do with the subject that I was teaching.
Well, and so like you said before, that wasn't your plan was not to go into teaching. Like, what was your plan?
So my plan was to play music
Okay.
myself, and I do, and I did. So, but I didn't grow up like I'm going to have a classroom and I'm going to decorate it and I'm going to, sort of a lot of kids do that. They grow up and like, I'm going to be a teacher. I knew I wanted to be a teacher from the time I was 10. Yeah. I actually said when I was in college, I don't want to be a teacher. And my undergraduate's actually in music performance, very intentionally, much to, many people's dismay in my life. They were like, what will you do with this? And, I kind of found my way to teaching, learning how to learn.
Mm, I get that. I think that makes a lot of sense. So how does like talk about your shift out of teaching into what you're teaching now, but like tell us the story, because I know you and there's a really important story in all of this. Particularly I think there's like life story stuff and then there's also teaching journey stuff layered with it. So tell us some of the layers of the beautiful parfait story that we have.
Yeah, I'll try to, it can be long, but I'll try and make it sort of short. So in my world, my oldest son struggles with substance use disorder. And in our journey as a family, it was really stressful. And I was a teacher during that time. I was his teacher actually at one point. And there came a point in our life where he had, had gone to treatment a couple times and was not successful long-term in maintaining recovery from that disease. And he was in active addiction and living in our home. He was young, a young adult, old teenager, young adult. And he walked out of our house one day, and that was sort of my epiphany moment of just realizing that everything I had been doing was not working in helping him. And it certainly was, I was not feeling any better. So nobody was thriving. And we were all barely surviving. And I had to kind of ask myself a hard question, which was, if he does not make it through this, am I okay with the last thing that he saw, felt, and heard from me as his mom? Because the reality of addiction is a lot of people don't make it. And that results as death. And that's a really scary thing. And so, that hard look at myself, the answer was no, I was not okay with it. I wasn't okay with how I was showing up in that relationship. And, we had been given support through treatment centers and therapists and various helpful people. But none of it was effective. None of the support that we were being given was effective in either supporting or guiding him, influencing him, or in actually making us be able to tread these waters. So I, at that point, was like, there's got to be a different way. And I dove into like, well, I mean, this way's not working, so let's try something else. And what I found was there is a lot of data around other modalities that were not being given to us as a family. And we really just started implementing a different way with him and with ourselves. And, it wasn't like uncovering some dinosaur that had been uncovered or that had been buried and we discovered it. It really was putting together various just styles of connection and understanding and support, both for ourselves and for him, that we had not been given before to put together. And so I started to do that. So essentially I took that information and I put it together for ourselves in, for lack of a better term, a curriculum, because I was a teacher. So I put it together into a unit and we did it. And it was effective. So and it's not necessarily like a foolproof method of, oh, if you do this and kick your legs 4 times, the person you love will get better and everything will be great. But what I can say is you can start feeling better. You can start healing separate from your person. And you can connect in a way that does create influence. And that's what we discovered. And so over that time, I was a teacher and I started to kind of just live out loud my journey a little bit, which had been secret prior to, just because of shame and just, I mean, you don't walk around speaking that all the time in the grocery store. So, I started to speak it, and because I got healthy, and, all of a sudden all these people started coming out of the woodwork and, go talk to her, go talk to her, go talk to her. And I was teaching as well. And then the pandemic hit, which was a great, not stressful time at all for teachers.
Right. It was totally seamless. Perfect. It was great.
So seamless.
Everyone enjoyed it.
So seamless. And particularly special teachers and music teachers, because like music became the super spreader event of the pandemic. So that was really fun. And all of that kind of overlapped. And that, in my mind, education and what I didn't believe about education became so big that I just started to feel pulled in a different direction. And, through conversations with my husband and a really toxic environment that I was teaching in, we decided that this was a thing and we could really help people, or I could really help people. And this would be a shift that would be good for, my own health, for helping other people. And I haven't looked back since. It's been great.
Well, and so, sorry, I'm trying to put all the thoughts together in one. Sometimes my brain goes like stutters. So what you're telling us is, like, you kind of took the teacher approach to like, hold on, wait, this isn't working for us. I'm gonna go find all the options. I'm going to sort of weave them together into my own like thematic unit, for lack of a better, right? Like that's essentially what it was, that both addresses what my kid needs and what we as humans who live with him want to help him, but also have individual human needs so that we can thrive, but also he can, and we can communicate what we need to as a family. And I think what's lovely is, it's almost like, to put it in teachers' terms, like a thematic unit with choice in it, right? Because what worked for you healing as mom might not work for me healing as mom, but there are tools and choices and things to pick and choose from in the kit that you kind of have created.
Yeah.
That then you got to look around and be like, oh, wait, you know what? There are other ways to teach. Here's something that I have to offer the world that maybe this is the right thing to do now.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So what do you think? So actually tell us first, like, what that literally is now, like describe in your words rather than like my mangled version of like what you do with people now and how that works. And then also what you love most about it.
Yeah. So I have a business where I guide families. So not the person with substance use disorder, but their loved ones. And I meet them where they're at. And I do that in various ways. So I work privately with families, truly meeting them exactly where they're at and where their needs are, and shifting their goals from, I want to control somebody else, to what can you control? And how can you manage both of those, like desire to control somebody else and help somebody else make better choices, and what's real for you? And how can you tread those waters? Because sometimes that journey is long. And so we work through a lot of different skills, understanding how they want to show up in that relationship by identifying their values, learning about their person and why those behaviors actually make sense, learning why their own behaviors of control, manipulation, maybe fear, like why those make sense, learning how to have self-compassion that fits their needs. It's different than what mine might be. And then learning how to communicate in a way that honors somebody else and their autonomy in the decisions that they get to make, and creates an opportunity to have collaboration and influence in the other person, which is what really they want. It's
Right.
just not as direct of a route as what they would like. But the reality is we can't control other people. So I do that. I work privately with families. I also run programs through some treatment centers, some substance use treatment centers. So families whose loved ones in treatment, I run kind of a family program that takes them in a less personal way through that same journey. Obviously, I can't,
Right.
address 30 people exactly where they're at, but I, try to generalize where they're at. And then I do workshops, which can be similar to kind of what's going on in the treatment center, but a little bit more of a support role in my own workshops because they're smaller. So that's what I do.
And what's the thing you love the most right now?
I think the thing I love the most is the impact that I can have, and um, just realizing for years, we walked this journey and we thought we were the only people.
Mm,
Yeah, like, and we weren't. There's millions of people, but we thought we were the only people. We felt like failures, and we actually weren't enjoying any part of our lives. So helping families get to a place where they can find some joy in their life, regardless of the other person. They can create a relationship that they're proud of and feel good about showing up in. And they actually can create impact in helping somebody else who's really struggling with a very serious illness that's really hard to um, battle. So I feel like I'm saving lives.
well, because you are. Um, it's really that simple. And I think it's interesting. It's that like my kids are still pretty young, but it is that they are their own humans and they are going to make their choices, and all I can do, like, that their choices, what I want to make their choices mean about me, and like how I think about my relationship to their choices and all of these things. Like, I know that because my oldest is 10, this is only just going to get exponentially more complicated for basically the rest of my life from here. So that's fun, and I'm really looking forward to it. Not exactly but it is that, like, control versus choice versus accept and allow versus boundary, right? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So moving from control to understanding.
mm,
So I wouldn't say allow, right? Like,
right,
so
right,
understanding is very different than co-signing a behavior. Um,
right,
Right. Yeah. But you can understand that there's a reason behind somebody else's behavior. So, and that's hard. That's really hard to get to. It's hard. People really struggle with the difference between understanding and allowing. Like, and that's where the boundary piece comes in, right?
right.
Like, so you can understand that there's a reason behind this behavior, even if I don't agree with it. And if this isn't what I would choose for that same problem. And then you can create a boundary about you, not about them. That's really about what feels safe for me. This is how I want to show up in this situation. This is my comfort level. This isn't about changing your behavior. This is really about, if your behavior is this, how can I show up and then still be able to collaborate and create influence and connect with somebody?
Well, and it's interesting. It's the boundary is about me. right? Like it's, and that I think applies in teaching and in parenting and in business and in whatever thing. It's like, well, because I had a client recently say something to me about, well, it's up to them to decide how this works. And I was like, is it though? Like the boundary, like I don't know if I've ever heard that so clearly, that like the boundary is for me. The boundary is set by me, for me, about me,
Yeah.
not theirs. Like it's not for me to give you boundaries. It's for me to set boundaries, right? And particularly in that circumstance, but in business also, like I set the boundaries, simple ones, like I don't talk to people before 11 on Mondays, but then also really complicated ones, right? Like what you're willing to do and how far and for what and where, but those are my boundaries. Like I set mine, I don't set yours. But
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of going back to, how did you teach? How were you a teacher? I have always started at the end. Like, where do I want to be? And particularly because I was a music teacher, a performing arts teacher, not just general music, but a band teacher. So there was, a visual in my head on how this piece of music should be performed at the end, and how do I get there and backing out of it. So I think that boundary is exactly like that. What's your goal? And a lot of times families will say, well, my goal is for them to stop doing that. And I'm like, okay, well, you have zero control over
not
that.
your goal.
Yeah. So let's talk through that. And so is your goal that you're not comfortable with this in your home? Is so, I would like for them not to do that in front of me. I would like for them not to show up that way in front of me. You actually do have some control in that. And that's where your boundary comes in, is, being able to say, what feels safe to me is to not have conversations if you've been behaving in this way, if you've been drinking. I am not comfortable in conversations after you've been drinking. So if I feel that you've been drinking, I'm going to go ahead and remove myself. It's not about them doing anything. They can still be here in their space with their choices, but it's about how I'm going to show up in that.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So I'm gonna like shift us into the went from teacher to business owner hat,
Yeah,
right? Like
that
talk to
happens.
me about like changing hats
Yeah.
and how that whole thing has felt, because there's the mission part of it, which is like that was the same in teaching, right? Teaching is such like a mission heart driven thing. There's the mission in the heart, and then there's the paperwork and the
Yeah.
stuff. So talk to me about the, like, we're going to put the mission and the heart stuff over here for a minute, but talk to me about like you put your business owner hat on and you go like, whoa, talk to me about that shift for you.
Yeah, weird. That was definitely a weird shift. And I would consider myself a very conceptual person. So I'm all about the gray area and the colors and the art and the sound and the look, and not so much about the spreadsheets. So I have to really be careful about that and make sure I'm doing my spreadsheets too. But I would say, the pandemic definitely helped because my teaching position was so hard at the end, as every single teacher, at least in this country, if not the world, is feeling this. And I felt like I was breaking. I was breaking. And so the details of kind of create a website and get an LLC and, get a tax ID number and open a bank account and all those details that are involved in kind of making it an actual business on paper. I had a place to put energy that wasn't being honored in the classroom.
Mm.
So, my energy that I was putting into the classroom was not, I was not being cared for very well. And so I was able to put that energy somewhere else and feel the fruition of it. And so I think that was helpful. Definitely my timing was helpful with that. But yeah, that's hard. I sort of joke and say, when I was a teacher, they used to bring my clients to me on a bus and they would just show up. I didn't have to like go get them. I did a little bit because I was a music teacher, so I would do recruiting and stuff like that. But they kind of just came to the building,
They
and then
scheduled them.
they scheduled them and I did my job and then I sent them home. And now I have to get my job every day.
Mm,
So that's a shift, and definitely, I mean, I think no matter what business you do, and I have a very heart-driven business, there's still a level of sales that's involved with that. And that's probably been my biggest challenge of like, okay, we're coming up on a new month turnover. And I'm like, oh gosh, here we go. Gotta start over again this month. And you feel like I'm nothing. And then, then things start falling in place, like you are something. But that's probably the hardest thing to me. But um guidance, I've had a coach. I've watched a lot of people. Because I was the kind of teacher I was, became that kind of teacher because I'm that kind of learner
mm.
of, observe, um, take it in, let it soak in, and really then be discerning with like, I think I like that. I like how that person executed that. That makes sense to me, and then be able to execute that. So I think that's been helpful. But certainly as a transition, it's not like, oh, I'm just going to open a business and it's just going to happen. That doesn't exactly work.
Well, and it's interesting. There's two things in there, I think, and I'm going to write one of them down so I don't forget. Um, I think the first is something really interesting about like when things in teaching started to feel out of control, you went to like, but I can control the shell, the structure of a business. Like I can put my need for forward momentum and measurable progress here into this creation, this like building of the shell and the box that is this business. Like I get that. And I
Yeah.
think we all, especially early in business, want to sort of gain some control, right, on stuff and colors and websites and posts. I think the other interesting thing that you just said is like researching and watching and absorbing, but then also discerning, because I think actually that's where a lot of people go sideways, is they forget that part of what they need to do in the absorbing process is then to go like, that fits, that doesn't. I
Mhm.
liked this, I'm going to try that. This really doesn't feel like me, I don't want to. Like they stop trusting themselves. They go, well, but I'm new, so I'm going to try all the things,
Right.
which is a recipe for it's like the bus to crazy town. Like it's really, it's the fastest way to drive yourself insane, right? So I think that discernment is a really big deal. So like how and when do you feel like you really started to trust your discernment, or have you all along? Like did you have to think really hard about that?
I think really hard about that regularly. Yes, for sure. So my journey was, in February of my last year teaching, 2021,
Mm,
is when I started putting my energy into the box, right? Into
yep.
the, okay, spreadsheets and the things I don't like to do, but it felt like I had get an LLC check, just like, yeah,
Yep,
I
down the
could do
list.
it. I could execute it and feel successful. I was not feeling successful otherwise, but, um, so I started that journey in May. Like literally, I sort of had a goal of, I think this is the combination of conceptual and, um, non-conceptual, I guess, like data driven, which isn't my strength, but I had a goal of, I really want to be able to say I have something when I walked away from my job
Mhm.
that identified me for a really long time. So I had that deadline. Deadlines help. I think
Yep.
deadlines really help actually, even if they're self-created. And that was a self-created deadline. There was nobody created it for me. It was my created deadline. But so I had that. And then I spent the summer just trying to figure out, reining my ideas in, because I had all the ideas. I was going to do all of the things. And you can't do all of the things, at least not initially. So, and actually, I think you are the one that was like, what's the one where's your center? I think you actually said that to me, and that was helpful.
Mm.
Or if it wasn't, maybe several people, but I do believe you had said that, like, whoa, like hone in on the middle, and then go out from there. And that was super helpful. Like, what's the one thing I want to help families? Okay, there you go. And then start to go out. And I'll tell you, just I agree with you on the discerning piece, like really being able to um, do the work on yourself to understand, like, what are your values? What are your business values? What's important to you? What is going to sustain you? And not just looking at the next shiny thing, or this is the other problem, if somebody else is doing something similar to you, how are they doing it? It might work very well for them and not work very well for you,
Yeah.
because that's not who you are and how you show up. So similar to my journey with my son and how I guide families, it's the same process. I mean, it kind of just keeps coming back around again. And I will say that, I do see other people in like or similar roles as me, around the country, even around the world. And I completely honor the way that they're going about it, but it does not work for me for various reasons. Doesn't work for my family, doesn't work for my timeline, doesn't work for my energy or my creative space. It doesn't work for my communication style. Lots of different reasons, but it might work very well for them. So, do I walk around with imposter syndrome regularly? Yes. And I talk myself out of it, and I do the work on myself to really identify um, how I want to show up to the people that I serve. Um, and I honor, and how I want to show up for myself and my own family. Because that's part of it too, is finding some balance in our nuclear family, and making it more sustainable than teaching kind of was at the time.
Well, and that speaks to like, what is your business value? Like, what do you want this to be? How do you want to make your choices? Like, what are I was talking to a client last week and she was like, well, but I want my business to be going and I want to be spending all this quality time with my daughter. And it was like, well, okay. But like, you're either going to focus on really, really pushing in the business and let go of the mom guilt,
Mhm.
or you're going to focus on loving and being super present for her. And it's going to grow, but just a little slower.
Yeah,
Like, you're
definitely.
probably not going to have both of those things going full steam ahead in different directions, because that's just how your arms fall off. Like, you pull both directions hard enough and your doll comes apart. And so it's that like business value, but coming back constantly to like, what am I here for? What's my value? What's my expertise? What is what is the message I have? Why does it matter? Who is it for? And sitting back down. And I think when we reconnect into our expertise like that, yeah, we all have imposter syndrome. There's somebody out there and you look at them and you're like, huh, how did she do that like that way? But like, there's so much more to that story. And it's like, oh, well, she did like these 14 things that I would never have chosen to do, because I would have A, thrown up, or B, like, I don't want any of that. And it's
Mhm.
like, oh, wait, I don't want any of that. So why would I do it like that? And so it's
Yeah.
that coming back around to like constantly building trust with yourself, right? That you know how to do this.
Mhm. And I think, I mean, honestly, it's doing the work. When you're a teacher, even though the kids change over every year or every semester, and sometimes you change subjects or grades or whatever, probably initially you did the work with like, what are my values as a teacher? But then 15 years later, you're a different person.
Mhm.
You've learned a lot, and you haven't, but you just sort of naturally do it. So I literally, I mean, I have like notebooks, and I refer back to them, and going back to the work, what is the number one thing you want to be known for? And I have written that out. And, if someone asked me that, initially I'd be able to say, well, I want to be known for helping people, be able to manage this journey. But really, what does that mean? And having that written out and wordsmithing the words over and over so that you really are solid in how you want to be showing up, I think that allows you to then grow. But when, again, like you said, when you're trying to do all the things for all the people, you're not going to be able to do that. And or you will grow slower. Or I think maybe teachers transitioning out of the education field, traditional school, might look at a business owner and go, oh, I just do it. But you don't just do it. You
Oh,
don't just do it. You really have to do a lot of work identifying, who's your ideal client, and then saying that person isn't my ideal client, and that's okay. They're somebody else's who's doing some other shiny thing. That's their ideal client, but that's not who mine is.
well, and that you don't
And
want everybody.
yeah, you don't want you can't please everybody, and you can't be successful at everybody. So yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's also really rewarding. And I find it very, it's, it takes the energy that I think I wanted as a teacher to be given the space to do, which
Hmm.
was like self-exploration and self-identification so that I could show up my best self as a teacher. I now have the space to do that for my clients, but I actually have to do the work.
Right.
Um,
Well, you have to like sit down, and it's funny, like I will go through periods where my journal is literally just the same question every day,
mm,
where because I think it's like the practicing hearing it from myself. And then I'll say it to people, because there you also can't, like I can talk to myself all I want, but there's no there's no replacement for saying it to other people. There's
yeah.
no way to not do that. And I think one of the tricky things for teachers is like your clients come to you and you don't have to sell it to them. So you don't have to practice that. And you don't have to have them like say no to your face either, though they do for other reasons. That's a completely different conversation. But it's like, I can practice in my head. I can practice finding all the words and saying it all the ways. And then I have to pray those skills out into the world. It's like learning the piece of music, reading it, and then actually playing it are different things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you think that, like, how was the transition? How is the transition from what you do on paper in your head to the people part? Like, how have you found that process? Because you said earlier something about selling, and it's still like the hard part, right? How is the transition from like, oh, wait, I have to go bring it to them versus them coming to me? Like, how is that? Talk to me about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Again, that's probably for me, my most uncomfortable space, but um I believe so wholeheartedly in what I'm doing and my end goal. Like
Mm.
I see it. I know exactly where I want families to be when they get done working with me. I know exactly what I want my business to look like down the road. And so I'm able to kind of go, okay, well, these are the steps that I have to do. And some of them are more uncomfortable than others. Like, for example, I work with some treatment centers and I do some family programming, and it's really hard to break into those environments. One, they're incredibly busy, and it's hard to just get through the firewall to get to the people that make the decisions. Two, it's hard to convince a clinical team that I'm an and to what they're doing,
Right.
and they're doing great work, and they could be doing better work with my service and what I bring. And so I make a goal of having two, at least two per month, in person, or if it's somebody in another state on Zoom, but face to face meeting about learning about their program. And I truly do want to learn about it because I also refer people places, learning about their program, understanding how they are serving families and where those holes might be missing, and then being able to say, I think you're doing really great work. And I think you can be doing really even better job. And this is why. And this is my experience as somebody who has walked through programs very much like yours. This is what happened to me.
Yeah.
And then being able to speak that and kind of really bringing my value. And that's the first time I did it, or in the first couple times I did it, it was uncomfortable. And it still is a little bit uncomfortable. Like, here we go, going in and gonna make an offer. But when I've done the work to, who do I serve? How do I serve them? Why do I serve them? And what do I want this to look like? Because I've done that work, I feel super confident in the value I bring to other people. And I can say, I think you're doing such a great job. And I think that this is the piece I see missing. Would you like to talk about that?
Well, and to be willing to venture that out there and have the conversations and maybe they're going to say no, but okay.
Yeah.
It could be they say no now and 6 months later, they've been thinking about it the entire time and they come back and go like, hey, I've been watching for the last 6 months and you know what? We don't have that and we need it. And now I see it and
And the
being,
consistency of showing up in that silent time,
yeah,
even when you're like, I'm not really sure that they might not like me, or they don't answer my emails, or do they watch my stuff that I put out. But knowing that they are, and if
yeah.
they don't like you, they'll just, ignore you, but continue to ignore you. But they are paying attention and consistently showing up the same person that you are, is really important. And I'm super glad that, like I said, my timeline from February to where I'm at now, which is now over a year, kind of chunking down. Being a teacher too, your timeline of how things, the timeline breaks down really well. So like
Yeah.
summer, I'm going to do this. Fall, I'm going to do this. First quarter, I'm going to, like, I still kind of work on teacher
Yeah, I
timeline.
do too.
Yeah. Which actually, I think it works really well. It just helps break the year up really well. But, taking the time last summer, it was actually convenient because I still had a paycheck over the summer, from being a teacher. Taking that time to really do that work allowed me to show up exactly how I wanted to show up. Have I tweaked things since? Yes, absolutely. January, I definitely had like okay, here we go. This is, new and improved me. But I definitely didn't go at it with a fly by night, um, mentality. And I have seen people transition into working on their own, being solo or entrepreneurs a little bit that way, where I'm like, I don't even know what you do, or like, I can't quite figure this out. And, I'm
Yeah.
like, take a minute to actually to do that work and figure out who you are and how you are going to serve people first. And then the other piece, I think, everyone has comfort with different things and discomfort with other things. Some people might be very uncomfortable with the creative aspect of it. And that's where I love, but the one-on-one conversations are a little bit harder for me, but I just make myself do it. I write it
Well, but I
down.
think I think teachers are what I find in my experience with them. And I talk to lots of them is that lots of teachers are like, we're cool on the creating and the planning. And then we get to the like, you want me to what with that person in this whole networking? Who? What words did you just say? I don't think I want to do that. That sounds terrible. That sounds like doing more than talking to my teacher next door, who I really enjoy, and ignoring the guy 2 doors down who we hate. Like
Yeah.
that sounds
Yeah.
that
It can
sounds
be
terrible.
scary. It can be scary, but yeah.
But there
I mean,
is,
I don't want to sound like a broken record, but again, if you sit there and you do the work, if you really are intentional with who am I, who do I serve, how do I show up, and what's my value in this area, that discomfort becomes a little bit less.
yep. Well, and I always think about it as like growing into new shoes. Like I feel like I'm constantly growing into new shoes. Like, and when they're the next size up, do they fit right yet? No. But are they like clown shoes? No. Nobody realizes they're a half size too big for me besides me. I'm just going to work on growing into this next pair of shoes. And then when these shoes fit, I'm going to buy another pair of shoes that are a half size too big and grow myself into them. It's like a gradual evolution. It's not me going from like size 9 that I am now to 14s tomorrow. Like that's not how that's not going to work. I'm going to look crazy. But it's that like gradual, you keep asking yourself that question, and the way you answer it today and the way you answered a year ago today is different, because you're growing into this version of yourself that's constantly pushing forward and evolving a little bit more. It's just you just into the next pair of shoes, right?
Yeah, totally. And when you were a baby teacher, that's what you did too, in order to become a good teacher, right? Like you saw the teachers that you were like, wow, I just respect how they manage their classroom. And so you paid attention and you watched and you asked questions and you put
Mhm.
yourself in spaces that you could learn from them. Same thing. It's the
Well, and you
same
did it
exact thing.
wrong and you did stuff. Can you
Yeah. And you
remember
did
the
it wrong.
first,
Yeah.
do you remember things in your
Yeah.
first 3 years that you were
Yeah.
like,
You're like,
oh
oh,
God,
yeah.
like, I cannot believe I said that to or like, I can't believe I thought that was going to work.
Right.
Like where I just even today, I'm like, ah, God, there are things. I remember my first year teaching when I ran out of corners because my strategy with the boys I had in my classroom was like, I'll just put this one in this corner and put this one in this corner. And then the fifth kid, I looked at my husband when I got home and I was like, I ran out of corners today. Like, now what? Like, now what? Where do I put that kid? Like, dead in the middle? I don't know. Like, what's happening here? So there are things you fail. You like try lessons that are just epic disasters. Like, you do all of this and it's built into teaching. And in business, we kind of go like, well, I'm not allowed to do that. Yeah, it's kind of the same though, isn't it? Like, we
Yeah.
got to do that. We have to have people be like, you're terrible at this.
Yeah. It's like in band, I used to tell kids, you have to make mistakes out loud. Otherwise I can't help you fix them. You can't
Right.
make mistakes silently. If there's no effort, then all I'm going to say is, well, I need you to give me something,
Yep.
even if it's really ugly, so we can then move forward. And it's the same thing. You've got to
Yep.
make the mistakes out loud. Yeah.
With my college kids, my math kids, I always tell them like, you got to pick up the pencil. Like, when you want to ask me for help, I am happy to help you, but you have to bring something that was paper to pencil with you. You can't just be like, I don't get it. Because
Right.
that's not, don't get what? Like, let us get more specific. What did you try? And they're like, well, I didn't. Like, oh, okay, well, go do something, even if it's wrong, and then bring it back and we'll start from there. And they're like, what? They
Right.
every semester there's one that like then has to go to the dean and tell them I'm a terrible person and blah 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 blah. But then she'll turn around and go like, well, did you try the problem? And they're like, we do this at least once a semester.
Yeah.
So tell me, um, what's the one piece of advice you want to give people as they transition, as they start, as they live in the business world, even a year in or 3 years in or 5 years in? Like, what's the thing you think they should know that they might not?
Wow. Um, you actually have what it takes,
Mm,
and you just need to keep walking each day. Just keep taking a step. What's the next right thing you can do today? And it might turn out to be the next wrong thing you did today, but if you keep walking forward, you actually have, and I'm speaking really specifically to teachers especially. I mean, I think
yep.
everybody has what it takes, but teachers, particularly after the last couple of years, I think feel so unsuccessful about themselves that they might have these great ideas that the world really needs, and they're afraid to implement them. And I would just say you actually have all of the skills, and once you can step out of that role of traditional teacher in a traditional school, especially if you were in one that was not very healthy, I think you'll realize that you have a seat at the table and people really do want to hear you. And you are an expert in what you're going to talk about. And you have all of the skills. We solve all of the problems as teachers every single day. There is not a problem out here, out in the other part of the world, that you haven't already solved. So just take a step forward.
Yes. Well, and yes, 100,000%. It's like, not only did you solve all the problems, but you also know what to do with the kid that didn't come with clean laundry, or like, you literally all the problems, and
Yes.
not even just like kids learning, all of them all at once, like all of them. So that's exactly right. It's just keep going and know that you have something to offer. Agreed. Tell them how to find you, and I will link all of that in the show notes, but are in the transcript also. But tell them how to find you. Tell them if there's something they should come to. There's always something they should come to. They should start stalking you maybe a little bit, but in the
Yeah.
best possible way, because there's
I
there's
love
no
stalkers.
reason not to. Like, stalkers, this is the good version of stalking, not the call the cops version of stalking. Please don't do that, friends. But like, talk to them about how to have access to you and what they should come to that you're doing soon.
Sure. Yeah. So my website is www.reclaimrecover.org. That's probably the best place to find me. I have my phone number and my email on there. I have my calendar is accessible so people could have a chat with me if they wanted to do that. My email is lisa@reclaimrecover.org. I'm probably the most active on Instagram, which is reclaim_recover. On Instagram, that's where I'm the most comfortable and I find my people there. But I also have a Facebook and LinkedIn page as well. But you can find that on my website or in the show notes. And what I do want to say, this was about transitioning out of teaching into another kind of teaching role, but or into a business/teaching role. But I do want to say I'm positive because I know the numbers that there are people who are probably experiencing exactly what I experienced in some way in their lives, and you aren't alone. So please do stalk me, because when that moment comes when you say I can't do this anymore and I need some guidance forward, you'll know where to find me. So I'm perfectly welcoming of stalkers, and I have many that I know secretly, silently watch, and then when the shoe drops, they reach out. So I'm happy to talk about your journey as well.
Well, and I think it is one of those reassuring things. I tell people this all the time where they're like, well, but I just I don't know who to talk to. Like, well, let's have a conversation, like an actual, let's talk. They could talk to you. They could talk to me. I have all kinds of conversations with people where you're just like, hi, this is how we do this. You get on, you tell the story. We'll ask you some questions. It'll be great. And then we'll say, who you haven't met yet that you should talk to. You have to meet so-and-so that does this kind of thing that you should do that. That's how it works. Welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome to this business world where people actually have ideas for you and want to support you in all of these things. It's lovely here. Come.
Yeah. Come over here. The water's warm.
The water's warm and not too hot, not too cold, lovely and refreshing.
Yeah.
And also occasionally scary, but in the best possible way. Well, Lisa Smith, I thank you truly for coming to chat with us today, to tell us all the things, to talk about the fun bits and the scary bits and all the things in between. I will link all of Lisa's stuff in the transcript notes. It will all be there. And then you guys know, if you want to come talk about coaching or you want to come talk about growing business and really simplifying things, that is what I do. And you can find me in all my places. My group is Teachers in Business on Facebook, or my website is torpycoaching.com. Stalking is always welcome there too. But I think Lisa's point is really good. Remember, there are always people watching in the best possible way. They are there. All right. We'll talk to you all next week.